Who said I don't like the topic? No, seriously, who? Because I have a disagreement with that guy.
Who's that?
The guy who said I don't like the topic.
White powder! White powder! Is what you find in D.W. Griffith's cabinet of medicine. Welcome to the Flick
You're
Lab.
kind of spoiled already. What is today's film?
Yeah. So, welcome to one of the most influential directors of his generation, D.W. Griffith's masterpiece, The Birth of a Nation. Oh, so, alright. We have opinions like Woodrow Wilson, the president at the time, who said that it's like writing history with lightning, quote. So,
God damn, Woodrow.
Of course, this is a heavily problematic film, made in 1915, today known as the most racist film ever made, in the Americas at least. Of course, it was not viewed as such at its time. Well, it was, but not as much as today.
It kind of was, and it kind of wasn't.
Right? Of course, there was the NAACP, which was supporting the black populace and trying to ban outright this film and not permitting it being seen anywhere in its premieres around the United States. And the attempts were, as far as I know, largely unsuccessful.
They managed to shut it down, was it in 1 or 2 cities? That was about the extent of that's about the extent of the successfulness of that boycott.
Absolutely, and this is based on a Ku Klux Klan book. It's
the second book in a trilogy. It aims to tell you exactly how great thing Ku Klux Klan is.
Yeah, it's aiming to tell you how noble the first iteration of the Ku Klux Klan was compared to now. Now, of course, it has nothing to do with what it was at the time. Noble at the time, not so noble now. For some reason, Dixon, the writer of the book, Thomas Dixon, and his good buddy D.W. Griffith, the director, they were not supportive of the current iteration of the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan that actually rose. Probably partly because of this film, it's not quite clear, but it was either following the aftermath of the First World War and or the birth of a nation.
Quite often the rise of the second iteration, or at least a large chunk of the responsibility is credited to the birth of a nation.
Yeah, and that's easy to see because at the time, movies had way more influence than they have today, at least in a sense that you could easily tell a different kind of a version of historical, facts, with air quotation marks. And nowadays we can do a little bit more fact-checking online, but at the time this was kind of like some kind of a Bible for some people, and something that the Ku Klux Klan new edition really believed in, that was the historical facts that are presented in the film.
I don't know if anyone believed that what's depicted here is historical facts, even back in the day. Right?
Partly
when
it is.
Like, pretty much the entire content when it comes to how things went in the South and the whole Freeman situation, it's pretty obviously a work of fiction.
Yeah, it's true.
Simply when you look at it. And I fail to believe that even the contemporary audiences back in the day would have actually found it as any kind of a historical representation, what the film shows you. I'm pretty certain that everybody in their goddamn nuggets knew that what they are looking at is fiction. What might have actually worked or contributed to the fact that the film had such of a big influence back in the day was the fact that the ideas and the ideologies and the overall hatred that is depicted in the film was still quite commonplace in 1950s America. This was still a good 40 years before Rosa Parks and the bus boycotts and all of that. The film was released in what was very strongly the segregationist era of American history.
If you ask Woodrow Wilson, the president once again at the time, basically he said that this film is the historical representation, it's historically accurate. So I don't think he was alone with those thoughts.
And then again, Woodrow Wilson also was friends, if I remember correctly, with Dixon. And also Woodrow Wilson himself was kind of aloof and, at least at times, a raging racist himself.
Yeah, he was known as kind of openly racist character. But
yeah, it's kind of hard to say, go and say for certain 100% like how often Wilson was racist, but or was being racist, but yeah, the dude did write the whole history of American people, which in itself already has some pretty troubling pages and quotations.
Later, of course, yeah, Woodrow Wilson had to kind of backtrack in his words, and he told that he basically had to deny what he had said before about the lightning and how accurate it is in its representation.
It's kind of like a proto-Trump in that sense.
Yeah, could be. Well, when was the first time that you have seen The Birth of a Nation?
It was in a gentleman's meeting where, let's not go in any more detail. we had theories about race in that meeting. Now, in all seriousness, Birth of a Nation is a film that I actually took quite a long time before I actually saw it. I was aware of the film and I knew about the film like good 10 years before I eventually checked it out myself.
Probably not something that you saw on TV.
No, this was something that I actually had to look out, or something that I had to search for before I was able to see the film. And at the same time, it was kind of an obligation, or at least I thought it was back in the day, that as a cinebuff, I just have to at some point watch The Birth of a Nation because of it's kind of the fame that it has, the legacy and the reputation of it being somehow a groundbreaking, albeit a rather troubling movie.
Yeah, funny thing that being such of a big deal at its time, such of a big blockbuster, that you just can't see it on TV somehow. Well,
I guess that's simply because the woke culture has been suppressing the white art for God knows how many decades now. I myself blame the Chinese for this and the introduction of soy into our food culture.
Often for what this film is being credited is its technological or artistic merits, artistic firsts even, which is not even quite true. If we're talking about close-ups for that matter, that can be often attributed to George Albert Smith, who did the, well, albeit 30-second film, but still a sick kitten from 1903. He had a close-up of a kitten there. And sure, we have seen close-ups before. Then there's the attribution of the switchback, or so-called cross-cutting, which had also been done, for example, the likes of Edwin S. Porter. And he is kind of often considered to be the innovator there. For example, Life of an American Fireman, also from 1903. So you have an interior shot, and you continue that with the exterior shot, for example, like it does in the burning house. And he also didn't invent the feature film, that's for sure. That was done around Europe already. So yeah.
Yeah, and that, what you just said there, is precisely the reason. Outside of course, the racial facts and 100% true race theory that we are dealing here today, but But what you said there is the reason why I wanted to actually cover The Birth of a Nation. Because, like you mentioned, the story around the film goes that Griffith innovated and created many of the cinematic techniques that are kind of a commonplace today. Like, this is an argument that is being brought up repeatedly. I've even been on a university lecture where the professor or the grad researcher who was giving us the lecture mentioned The Birth of a Nation as kind of a birthing place of all these engineering features in cinema. And the fact is, like you mentioned, that the legacy mostly does not hold true in Griffith's case. Like, if you take the most common claims about what The Birth of a Nation supposedly innovated and created, and then make a bullet point list of them, and then go through that list bullet point by bullet point, you can actually debunk the entire goddamn list.
Yeah. Of course, if your argument is to be that this is the first film that got all these techniques under the same roof and then introduce it for a large crowd because of its A, big budget, and B, just, with big budget comes the more grandiose nature of it all. More visibility for this film. Then in that sense, it probably was the first.
Yeah. What The Birth of a Nation might be, first off, it can possibly be a film that like you said, for the first time actually brought all those technical elements into a one picture.
Yeah.
But that's about the length of that. And something that is actually quite funny, since you gave already the examples of the debunking examples of kind of the heaviest of the claims, the switchback and the close up. Actually, the funniest part when it comes to those is that you can actually find previous examples of those techniques being used also from Griffith's
Yes.
own filmography.
Yes.
Like for example, the close-up was used already by Griffith himself in the Lawndale Operator in 1911, and there is the proto close-up in the Musketeers of Big Alley, where it's not a real close-up in the sense that the film the camera itself doesn't come any closer, but kind of a proto in the sense that the actor himself moves it to a close-up distance in front of the camera, and you kind of get the exact same cinematic effect still. And also the switchback or the cross-cutting as it's known today, Griffith also used that technique already in The Quarter in Wheat in 1909. So Griffith, when it comes to Birth of a Nation, Griffith is kind of being credited inventing the cinematic techniques that he has. Well, maybe he even invented them, but he invented them way back when.
Yeah, and then when it comes to close-ups, this is not even at all heavy on close-ups. Actually, there's very little amount of close-ups. I mean, it mostly consists of full shots and medium shots from what I was watching when viewing it. So, and what could be something that was one of the first things here to see is that there's a lot of movement in the camera. For example, following the Ku Klux Klan horse rides. And there's obviously some kind of a automobile or such that from which they are filming it. And yeah, I don't know if if it was seen for the first time here, but there's that, and then there are the fade-ins and then opening to directly to a new frame.
Yeah. Also techniques that Griffith himself didn't invent. I don't know, when it comes to the tracking shot using a car, if that's perhaps a first here. Maybe. Hard to say, but fade out and fade ins also have been used in silent films many times before The Birth of a Nation. And something to really to rub the insult or salt even more to the wound. something that I would say to any Finn would be the most shameful and kind of most insulting would be to lose to the Swedes somehow. And when it comes to Birth of a Nation, Griffith also loses to Swedes because even the Swedes actually managed to use most, if not all, of Griffith's techniques already, at least in 1913 with Ingeborg Holm, which noting that one of the kind of innovations that the rumor says the Birth of a Nation introduced was restrained expression and nuanced acting, and Ingeborg Holm actually manages to beat the Birth of a Nation even on those regards.
Yeah, this was also the first film to be shown at the White House, thanks to the racist President Woodrow Wilson once again.
Yeah, but once again, you have to be extremely careful with the details and the wording, because like mentioned, it's the first film to be shown in White House.
Mm-hmm.
The previous films have been outdoor presentations, so that's also when it comes to being first at the White House. It was first indoors presentation at the White House.
Oh, really? Okay, I stand corrected.
No. It's basically the claim itself is still true in White House.
Okay.
Emphasis on in.
Not on the front lawn of the White House.
No, because the previous presentation was on the lawn of the White House.
Oh my God! Sounds like someone has been using some kind of a marketing language and trying to do his best to make this sound more grandiose than it is.
And that actually might be something that Griffith really was first. Marketing and hype. Because this film most definitely was marketed and hyped from to the heavens above by Griffith himself. There was lavish marketing campaigns built around the film. The screenings of the film itself were kind of built as a marketing stunt. There were lavish screenings and the 12-page brochure that you got with you after you left the screening, and I would credit to much of the legacy of the Birth of a Nation or the story around the film, like the whole notion how innovative this movie is supposed to be. I'm actually crediting that more than anything to Griffith's marketing tactics.
Griffith, who was not really swimming in money when he was making this, and also got into such of a trouble that he was not able to provide for the Thomas Dixon his payment of $10,000 for this, and instead he offered, was it $2,000 plus 25% of the earnings of the film, which of course made him a very, very wealthy man after the release of the film.
Also following the whole narrative, Griffith as misunderstood genius who innovated and, God forbid, if not even created cinema and camera and film and everything himself. Well, there is also the continuation of the story from the Birth of a Nation, which kind of then immediately is the downfall of Griffith himself. It's almost like already the contemporary audiences back in the day at some point realized that the Griffith that had been sold to them and the kind of a innovative film that that was claimed that they had seen really didn't exist. And that's something that might have, or I believe, might have come and bite Griffith in the ass when it came to his second film, or the follow-up film Intolerance, which back in the day actually was a financial catastrophe to Griffith, to a point where it kinda ended Griffith's career. Not in the sense that Griffith wouldn't be able to work in film following Intolerance. Griffith was able to keep on directing movies to the end of his career, but it did ruin Griffith in the sense that the films following Intolerance were no longer 100% his productions. He more or less to get his films financed, he had to make deals with the financiers, and he lost the autonomy that he had enjoyed previously, and became more or less just a director for hire.
Yeah, there are so many things to cover here that I think we could sit here for 10 hours, but I don't know about you. We could go into the scene by scene while we're doing all of this, unless you have a pressing engagement to snort white powder with D.W. Griffith's ghost.
Seeing exactly how goddamn long the film itself is, I guess we should A, snort powder, and then B, quickly get to scene by scene.
Sounds good. So the film starts actually with something that was not there in the first place. It's a plea for the art of the motion picture. Sorry, I can't help laughing at this.
Yeah, the film is kind of a, or at least the modern version of the film. The DVD, Blu-ray copy that you can purchase. It starts on kind of a loose footing because of the pleas and basically the Griffith statements when it comes to covering his own film.
Yeah, this is really weak, some kind of a damage control. Please don't hurt us. For re-releasing this film in 1921, when they included this little plea for the art of the motion picture, which
damage control being also in my opinion the key word when it comes to the added text boxes in this film.
Yeah, it says we do not fear censorship, for we have no wish to offend the improprieties or obscenities, but we do demand as a right the liberty to show the dark side of wrong, that we may illuminate the bright side of virtue, the same liberty that is conceded to the art of written word, that art to which we owe the Bible and the works of Shakespeare.
Which is also funny, seeing how both Bible and Shakespeare's plays also are a work of fiction. and not a historical accord, just in case that Griffith himself might not be upon the uptake when it comes to Bible.
There's also the problem when you see these title cards throughout the film, that sometimes it has the text that, what was it, in the right lower corner you have this, that this is trying to be or is in fact the perfect accurate description or reenactment of what happened back then. And the problem only is that I don't know if this carries to the second half of the film when it gets extremely out of control and fictional as hell, but having those title cards in the first half of the film, and then carrying on with the second half of the film, that anyway tells or communicates to the audience that you're supposed to kind of believe everything that is here.
It is the facsimiles that are added in the lower end of the title card. If I remember correctly, they are just a problem of the first half of the film, and they are mostly Griffith simply patting himself on the back for the fact that he has been able to reconstruct the sets. Facsimiles, they sure do actually get pretty tiresome as the first act goes on, and you just, it's a title card with them, followed by another title card with them, and it starts to pretty much already smell like Griffith is just begging for you to actually pay notice to how close to the real theater hall our set is.
Yeah, facsimile is kind of a big word to use. Like it's basically suggesting that we did a carbon copy of what happened back then. It's like basically saying, I was there shooting this film when Lincoln was shot in the head. So, no, you weren't there.
Especially seeing how in those scenes you also use completely fictional and made-up characters.
Right.
Like for example, the Lincoln suicide.
But facsimiles aside, we have in the opening titles also this way that the titles were made at its time. This is also something that you have in Gone with the Wind. For example, you have the character name of Laura Cameron, and it's always followed, the pet sister, or Margaret Cameron, elder sister. I think it's kind of cute or stupid, because it gets sometimes really hard to follow anyway. You have one name of some dude there, and then below it's like his sister, her sister, their granddaughter, their aunt's granddaughter, their grandma's daughter's aunt's dog or something. Who cares? Okay, got carried away there. Also, it says, if in this work we have conveyed to the mind the ravages of war to the end that war may be held in abhorrence, this effort will not have been in vain. And once again, this doesn't have anything to do with the problems of the film itself, which is kind of an odd addition.
Yeah, my take on that title card was that it once again it's kind of it's preemptive damage control for basically what follows. Or my take on the title card is that it's a damage control for the depiction of the political characters and preemptive damage control for what follows in the second half of the film.
Followed by the bringing of the African to America planted the first seed of disunion, starting with the Great Footing. I suppose this is also from the original. Speaking of the original, Henrik, there were a couple or even more scenes that were cut from the film for the re-release of the film. And all of those scenes are, if not lost, they are buried in some kind of archive and have not been seen for over 100 years as far as I know. So yeah, Melvin Stokes, one professor who is knowledgeable in the film, he says that in the Library of Congress there's actually 7,000 feet of film from the original 1915 version, and no one has seen the material until to this day, and it is apparently all material that was cut from the 21 reissue of the film that we have today, and a lot of famous sequences were cut, and Stokes wonders if there's also the material included in there of some key scenes that were problematic. For example, there could be a scene where the black guy Gus is castrated, and some have also argued that the musical score includes the part of the castration in its current form, so that's kind of a remnant from those times. And another scene concerns one where there's like an anti-slavery meeting, and there's a small boy who is black, and he's pushed towards a rather overdressed white woman, and who makes kind of a disgusted gesture, suggesting that the boy would smell foul. That's it.
Yeah, because making the notion that black people smell most definitely would be too troubling for the film.
Those were the cuts made. Okay, we open the first shot with something. There's a guy in a dress and a black guy bowing before him.
Yeah, the first shot, the opening shot of the film is to depict kind of the slaves coming to America, like the birthing place or the first moments of the slave trade and slavery in America.
And then there is some courtroom material where a young boy is being taken forward.
Yeah, it's supposed to follow from those the glory days, the good, honest and pure days of the past into the kind of a corrupted and tarnished modern day of people are kind of demanding the freeing of the slaves.
And one of the most important title cards of the entire film is here when we are discussing one of the lead characters of the film. So in 1860, a great parliamentary leader whom we shall call Austin Stallman was rising to power in the National House of Representatives, and we find him with his young daughter Elsie in her apartments in Washington. And this is one of the families that we're going to follow throughout this film, and we got inside the Stallman household.
Yup, the film essentially revolves around two families, the Stonemans and the Camerons. Yeah, the Camerons coming from the south and the Stonemans being the product of the north. And when it comes to the Stonemans, it's the father is an up-and-coming rising political force in United States, especially after following the Civil War, and the Camerons are the good, old, honest, down-to-earth Southern gentlemen who also have a slave plantation, but who cares about the little detail?
No. But now Elsie is with her brothers, the Stallman country, home in Pennsylvania, playing around. They receive a letter, and it's addressed to Ben, and it says that the brothers are coming to see Ben on Friday. They're very much looking forward to this moment.
Yeah, and this is kind of the problems with the film proper starts, especially with the first half, which is Ben and the Cameron brothers. And basically the fact that the first half revolves completely around them.
Yeah, I sometimes have to wonder how the hell in the old days people were so writing in such of a biased way. For example, this title card here. In the Southland, Piedmont, South Carolina, the home of the Camerons, where life runs in a quaintly way that is to be no more. Like, this is so ideologically pure, I can't believe.
I would kind of credit that, once again, partly, and I emphasis on partly, to the segregationist policies and segregationist viewpoints in America at the time. But more than that, I would actually credit that simply to Griffith himself.
Now we're focused on Benny Cameron, the eldest son, but I have to say that it's really, as we discussed before we started recording, it's really hard to sometimes follow this film, what is happening here. Of course, this is really the early days of cinema, so the way that the story is told, the structure, the cinematography, everything is a little bit in progress still.
Then again, once again, outside of America, outside of Griffith, people had already solved this problem. Like, people were already telling very carefully crafted and extremely obvious narratives in feature films. Like, once again, when it comes to, being able to tell your narrative in an understandable fashion, the Swedes, once again, beat Griffith to the punch. Ingeborg Holm, which story-wise and thematics-wise is kind of even harder to take in or translate to the audience than The Birth of a Nation. Because Ingeborg Holm, essentially, it's extremely personal and close drama about a woman who, due to the fact that her husband dies of TB, loses basically everything. Loses the house, loses the business, loses even her children. And the unification that in the end Ingeborg is able to make with her eldest son, that's essentially the core story of the film. And that already as a drama, as a story you want to tell, it's much more delicate and therefore much more harder to convey to the audiences, especially in silent movie fashion. But Ingeborg Holm manages to pull this off. So yeah. I would say that when it comes to the film being hard to follow, it's more than the times and more than the movie being a silent film. It simply comes down to the movie being filmed by Griffith.
Yeah, I was kind of looking for something more clear juxtaposition. Of course, these techniques were fine-tuned later very much. Like we were talking in Parasite, how it was cinematographically differentiated these two houses with different angles. I don't think it's going on here. The film is indeed based on the stories of these two families, which didn't really open up to me until way later. That this is kind of what they're trying to do here. One family, second family, and those are the integrals.
Yeah, when it comes to the storylines of the film, like the problem is that the film has like 2 or 3 storylines going on, and they all basically intercut with these two families. There is the love story, which takes, unfortunately, the entire first half of the film, and then there is the political storyline, which mostly revolves around Stoneman and his rise to power and how he uses the power. And then there is the kind of a corruption of democracy, which is what we mostly follow in the second half of the film. All 3 storylines are kind of carried over throughout the film. That you are shown some glimpses of the storylines 2 and 3 during the first half of the film, and then they rose to prominence in the second half. But it's kind of a jumbled mess in the end altogether. Like the film doesn't really do a balanced carrying over of the all 3 story.
But at the same time, have to give it to those people at the time, for the Swedes and for Griffith, for being able to pull off even such a level of cohesivity in storytelling and frame sizes and all that. Because, well, you would think that since cinematography for moving pictures had been available for like only 20 years at this point. You would think that all of the techniques that they would use in The Birth of a Nation would be even less impressive, way less impressive. So, well, then again, these people are doing it for the money. They have to, even if they weren't completely conscious of every step of the way, how to frame things in as eye-pleasing way as possible for the audiences. It's getting a lot of things right already.
Then again, even following the preceding The Birth of a Nation, Griffith himself also had already a pretty long-running film career. So Griffith himself also isn't doing this for the first time here in Perth.
Yeah, the crazy bastard has directed at least 500 films, of course of differing length, most of them short films.
That he does. Griffith's filmography on its own is pretty remarkable in the end.
Here's new title card. Margaret Cameron, a daughter of the South, trained in the matters of the old school. And we get inside the household. And at this point, they are once again going through the same goddamn letter, I believe. That there's...
Or this is the response to the original letter.
It's actually the same letter. I believe it's like this... Oh, yeah. Okay, so the two... I don't know. So the two brothers are looking at the letter and then they send it. And then they look at it again when they have received it. I guess.
Yeah, it's still kind of a mess to follow that.
But then there's a cute shot of hostilities between... Well, actually the only hostile entity once again is the cat towards the two puppy dogs.
Yeah, no surprise there.
Yeah. Henrik, do you prefer dogs or cats? Oh.
Is that even a question?
No.
Yeah, I mean, especially following the uninvited. Which on its own right, it's pretty much a 100% accurate documentation of what cats are like.
Yeah, for documentaries go to that episode instead of this one. And then there is the word that is used that was actually, I would say it was a new one to me. Chums, the younger sons, north and south. Chums being the equivalent of a word for friends. I don't know. Definitely not in use today.
I don't know. I would actually say that it's still okay. At least on some capacity.
Yeah. And then after having some shots at the house, we go to the plantation, which is close to the house. And then we go to Love Valley, and something happens there. There are the slaves working in the fields, and this guy from the Cameron family looking at flowers.
Yeah, and two things to note already on this scene. The first one is basically the Southern apologist stand that it takes. And this is actually one of the reasons why I wanted to cover Perth so close to the Gone with the Wind episode. Because they these days both films share the kind of a same kind of a bit troubling legacy that they both are seen as Southern apologist movies. Meaning movies that try to argue that the Southern Rebellion on its core was a doomed but noble effort, which was not about slavery, but instead in the states' rights to self-govern over the government, and therefore also individuals' rights to kind of a self-govern, contrast to the government. And the second argument that these films usually pull off is that the slavery itself wasn't that bad ordeal, and the slaves in the end were actually treated rather nicely by the plantation owners, and therefore the whole "we must abolish slavery" stance that was taken in America back in the day was actually uncalled for, and mostly was just used as a political machinations of some upcoming politicians. And that is actually a point that already is presented in The Birth of a Nation here on the plantation scene, where the slaves once again are being shown in what are pretty hospitable environments. The work days are not that long and nobody is mistreated in any ways. And even the slaves themselves, goddammit, want to be there.
Now, what is with this podcast and slavery? We have Pocahontas, Sugarcane Alley, The Birth of a Nation,
Me
and
being
Gone
a
with the Wind. Yeah, and that which we do not talk about.
I don't know. I mean, when it comes to the last two offenses on that regard, I myself am to blame. We are following my picks for the films here at the podcast at this point.
Yeah, I want to state it out clearly. These are Henrik's picks.
But other than that, I don't know. We as a podcast we have this unfortunate habit of kind of ending up in rather troubling and hard situations here when it comes to the us and the movie. Like if it's not slavery, it's war crimes, and if it's not war crimes, it's rape, and if it's not rape, I don't even wanna guess what god awful abomination it's in that case.
A porn film, or
well, porn actually was one of the nicest films and thematic wise that we covered in this podcast.
or trying to kind of play with hot coals and do a film about the church and homosexuality for Poland on their Independence Day.
There we were actually being the good guys. So,
yeah, that was a good deed.
That was a good deed. So, dear listeners, please remember that one good deed as you follow us now in the insidious hate crimes and racism.
Yeah, the guy from the Cameron family finds his ideal girl in the picture of Elsie Stoneman.
Christ.
And maybe this is just me lazily following the film, but once again, I have no idea how the guy has gotten this picture, but there it is.
The origins of the picture is never explained. Ben simply yoinks the picture and
not creepy
then decides to keep it for himself, because I guess thievery also was one of those old world values that we have now lost. But yeah, when I said that the love storyline has problems, this kinda is my go-to example of that. The whole there in the film there are two love stories that we follow, and they are both kind of descending the line between north and south. The southerner falls in love with a northern woman, and northerner falls in love with a southern woman. And and the problem that I have, or the main problem that arises, in my opinion, when it comes to the love story aspect, is that the love or the kind of a formation of that love and of that passion is never explained or studied the least. Especially in case of Ben, where it's simply the case of I saw a picture of a lady, so now there is love and passion.
Yeah, good old times.
Good old times. When you didn't even have to actually meet the lady you decided that you will marry someday, like in person. It was enough that you had seen a picture.
Secondary things, you can tell that she is able to do the dishes, has two hands.
Yup. It's not about those little details in South.
Yeah, and then of course the storm is gathering to the peaceful perfection of the South. Because Lord Cornwallis has surrendered to the individual colonies in 1781, and now the threat is on by the new administration. And this of course means that if the North carries the election, the South will secede and war will follow. War, which by the way the South started.
Yep, in a kinda, yep, or historically, yeah, but not if you actually ask the Southerners themselves.
Of course, who would do such a thing? Okay, we have also seen these smiley black faces. They're enjoying their slavery all the time and doing happy dancing for the white rich people. Amongst which we have also these fake black people. There are so-called black faces amongst the black people. And the decision was made that the main actors of the film will be so-called black faces instead of real black people. But there are some multiple reasons for this. First is, of course, the fact that who the hell would like to play one of these lead characters as a black person. Of course, obviously they were able to get some black extras here because money talks, or maybe they were not even. Maybe they were oblivious of what kind of a project they were involved in. Nevertheless,
I'm guessing that Griffith never actually told the type of film he's making. He was simply asking, do you want to appear in this one?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you could do that. And what kind of a legal protection would be for these black people who would want themselves removed from the film? I'm guessing zero. But also, it wasn't until 1927 when it was finally allowed for black people and white people to play on the same stage at the same time in the theater. So many kind of challenges.
But that once again also is one problematic element added on top of all the rest when it comes to the film. The mentioned fact that for a film that is so much about the black uprising and the way how the quote blacks quotation marks are, like you mentioned, most of the black characters here are being portrayed by white actors in blackface.
And it was also made very obvious that they were just black faces, white people playing black people, due to the fact that it would have been problematic if it were not done so when there were white people in the same scene. We're of course introduced also to this mulatto servant in the household of the Stonemans, fake mulatto, or fake mixed-raced woman.
Yeah, the maid character of the film, which is pretty prominent on the first half of the movie, and then mysteriously disappears on during the second one. But in the end, in the film, essentially works as a character who does something. What that is never actually explained. The film makes it incredibly clear, and through this maid character makes clear depiction of the blacks being conniving, treacherous, and hate in their actions. And that the film very much telegraphs to the audiences that the mulatto maid of Stoneman has some kind of ulterior motives, like she's trying to play some kind of a power game on top of trying to play her affections on Stoneman. But what that kind of the end game is supposed to be, it's never actually explained in the movie because the character herself disappears when the first act comes to a closure or at the beginning of the second act.
That is that kind of an artistic touch of Griffith's. But the first call for 75,000 volunteers is happening. President Lincoln signing the proclamation. And we have this historical facsimile where we see Lincoln for the first time at his desk. A desk apparently which is very open to regular people, which we will get later on. So no wonder the guy got shot, if this is the facsimile.
But basically everybody just come and go and walk to Lincoln as they please.
Right, it's like a public kitchen.
Except when he goes to theater, then he has his bodyguard.
Yeah, extremely talented bodyguard. What happened to the bodyguard? I'm not sure. But it's fair to assume that the guy was hanged or shot quite immediately. Of course, there are kisses exchanged because it's time to go to the front and everybody is so happy and waving their handkerchiefs. Goodbye. This is the last time I see you. For the lost cause, as it's called.
Yeah, and when you mentioned that everybody is going to the front, that for some odd reason also includes the black soldiers who are joining Confederacy because reasons.
Mm-hmm. Interesting times indeed. There are some historical material that states that even some of the black people in their separate black people in their balconies when they were watching the film in the theaters, some of them were clapping for this film when it was supportive for the South, meaning like the Ku Klux Klan scenes or something like this. And when it comes to those, there was of course the apartheid in South Africa. There were separate theaters for the blacks or this separate balcony that was called the heaven. Yeah. And many of these things didn't really change after the Civil War was over. So much for, quote, equal rights, equal politics, and equal marriage.
No, For the United States, when after the Civil War, it actually took quite a long time to things settle down, or the racist policies to be abolished, and some might even argue that it hasn't done properly even today. Like the work is still unfinished, at least on some remark.
Right, and I see that this movie is definitely making fun of the statements of the North when the Civil War had basically ended, and there were these slogans, for example, 40 acres and a mule for every colorized citizen. And this was part of the Special Field Orders number 15. It was kind of a post-Civil War promise from the Union General William Tecumseh Sherman on January 16, 1865. But when Lincoln had his successor, the President Andrew Johnson, he reversed everything and annulled everything of the orders of the number 15, and this never came to be. So clearly poking fun at that.
Poking fun is something that the film kind of does constantly, especially when it comes to the northern characters or historical figures. The Stoneman character of the film himself is based on the Thaddeus Stevens, who himself was a member of the United States House of Representatives back in the day.
And now in the Stoneman facilities, there's this one person. Is it his brother who is putting the Confederate flag on his sleeping sister, and then she starts crying, supposedly because he's going to be in the war. And then there's some ball, and then the trumpet sounds, and it's time to go. Some letters exchanged again, and of course now the kind of a quote an irregular force of the guerrillas raids the town at 37 minutes into the film. And chaos ensues because the bad black people are here to destroy and ravage and rape and destroy and burn your little town, Sheriff.
Chaos also ensues on the audience's side because of the nuanced acting that the film allegedly somehow pioneered. Because when it comes to the raid scene and the camerawoman, when it comes to the female actors, it's really hard actually to say, are the characters supposed to be afraid, appalled, or simply, excited about the fact that their house is being raided?
Yeah, so there's this one Stoneman sister who I genuinely thought something is wrong with her, like not to make fun of anyone in such a situation, but I thought she was mentally unstable or something. Like she was laughing when the house was on fire, like smiling.
Yep. That's pioneering the nuanced acting.
And this is one of the things that is also attributed to the film, that apparently it has more nuanced acting, or less pronounced facial expressions, or more realistic acting than, if you will, less theatrical. Also, what is said to be that this movie has pioneered is giving focus to certain parts of the frame by blocking some of the frame with this black antimatter, which is also supposed to be some kind of a close-up when we are blocking part of the frame. An interesting technique of the time. Anyway, now at the front, it's time to get a little bit of a brotherly moment when is it now the two brothers that die and cutely in their arms, like resting.
Yeah, with Griffith on the background screaming "No homo." because there's some tender moments in that dying scene.
Yeah, I definitely.
There's some touching of the cheek.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely the way of the director's approach to directing was different at the time, because, well, if you wanted to record some of the original ambience sound, then the director had to shut up. But in this golden age silent film era, or you can do the shouting in the background all you want, and sometimes you can see it because the acting becomes so mechanical. Somebody might be turning, and then they in their eyes you can see that this didn't feel all natural.
Yeah, they kind of gives you the impression that the actor was doing something, and then all of a sudden, in middle of action, he or she gets told to do something else, and she quickly tries to course correct in mid-action.
Yeah, what about this color tints of the film? It's actually the original technique of the film where they wanted to color tint the films to make them distinguishable from each other, I guess. And that it does. It's a bit of a mess to follow, so the color tinting might help it a tiny bit. But to be honest, I wish it really wasn't there. I prefer to look at my pure black and white.
I don't know. I've kind of come to like and even appreciate the color tints in black and white films. I know it's a matter of preference, and it really kind of doesn't. In the end, it doesn't really affect that strongly on the film, one side or the other, and it's not really a necessary technique for a black and white silent film to color tint your image. But for me, every now and then, when used when used sparingly, it kind of lets, at least for me, it kind of lets me to have an easier going with a film, especially a long feature, because it kind of breaks down. It gives me a break amidst the black and white footage.
At 47:55, you have the title card, The Torch of War Against the Breast of Atlanta, the Bombardment and Flight. And that is followed by a frame where the town is on fire, and the people are on horses, and people carrying their children, and all chaos is loose. I have two versions of this film. In this version that I'm looking at now, this is some older digital print of the film where the image has not really been stabilized and the material is not from the best possible sources. And here the image is tinted red, and in the background you see the city that is also on fire, or the town. And if you look at the latest Blu-ray release of it, they did a fantastic job with that. They were looking in the archives for the best possible source material of this film that exists, which was extremely painstaking, by the way. They had to go through reels where many of it was not the completed print, but it was original footage from the shootings, and all of the material seemed to be in random order. So they had to go through everything and then just basically re-edit this entire film in place. And when it comes to this particular shot, the stabilizing of the image is really clear, because everything in the forefront stays in focus and stays still, but the background city is shaking like crazy, telling you that these were, of course, separate elements that were put together.
Griffith kind of uses the split screen technique a couple of times during birth.
That's a bit distracting, because in this shot it's perfectly something that could exist, but then there are some shots where it's just split and you can see the seams, and I'm not sure what he was trying to do there. What was he trying to do, like a 2-split, 3-split type of thing? Like, I don't know.
I don't know either. At times I've taken that in some scenes where the technique is used, it's supposed to showcase you two characters in the movie's real world in the forefront of the picture, and then through the split kind of show you what they are thinking about, to visualize their mental image that they are having inside their heads at the moment. But that's only in some scene. When it comes to the others, like for example the burning of Atlanta, I really can't say what Griffith was aiming at, because there it's made, at least in my opinion, it's made really clear to you that what you are supposed to see is one consistent image. Like the city is supposed to burn at the background of the image, so it can't be any kind of a presentation of an idea, of a mental image on that regard.
Yeah, for example, this one at roughly 49 minutes, there is one of those two splits that just doesn't seem realistic on any level. There is kind of a bright daylight brightness on the lower part of the screen, and then up you see like a town in flames during night. and it's not split even very smoothly at all.
Yeah, something that could be happening is that Griffith did that intentionally. Like, you were supposed to notice that it's two images, so that Griffith once again could get one of those pioneering firsts under his belt, or at least a claim for the first split image in movie history. This, of course, not being the first time that silent films have split image. There being previous examples of split image technique. For example, in Louis Weber's film Suspense, which uses even more complex and even more betterly created split screen image.
Now, of course, this glorious Griffith title card, TM, is showing us, quote, the last grey days of the Confederacy on the battle lines before Petersburg. Parched corn, their only rations, end quote. So, parched corn is something that is most likely coming directly from the experiences of Griffith himself when his family was extremely poor and he definitely got his fair share of parched corn. So if it's not coming from the book, it's coming from Griffith's experiences for sure. And they're waiting for the food train of the Confederates, but it's misled into another direction, apparently on the tracks. So there's an attack planned for saving the train. And here is where we get to one of these most bombastic, most hyped scenes of the film, where you have like a long establishing shot showing you basically the both sides of the trenches on the front lines.
And those kind of large, long takes that are used during the Civil War fights might actually be something that might be something where Griffith is ahead of the business, or of the scene. So to say, I don't really remember a previous silent film that would precede The Birth of a Nation that would have actually used these long shots.
Yeah, shots that actually also run for a very long time. But it looks pretty good.
At times, it's pretty good. That's one of the major problems when it comes to the film itself. At least in my opinion, the film has astonishing amount of shots that, in my opinion, actually run way too long, to a point where the film itself actually becomes really boring.
But also something that Griffith might have pioneered. There's a lot of things he might have, and many that he didn't, but might have pioneered the way that he apparently did shoot a hell of a lot of material and then just pick the best parts out of that hell of a lot of material and put it together for the exciting 3 hours that it is. Whereas I think people at the time were generally more conservative in using the film and just using it where absolutely needed.
Yep, which in return might actually lead into a more tight, more carefully constructed, and most notably shorter film.
Yeah, and news of the death of their second son and of the eldest being near death in a Washington hospital, says the title card. But this is the second time now that the family mother has gotten pretty crappy news, so this time she doesn't even bother to go on the sofa to cry. She's like, well, sad times. I guess I have to go see my son to the hospital. And Elsie goes to the hospital now, or actually Elsie is working at the hospital and meets this one patient from the Camerons who is absolutely in love with Elsie. And then shows Elsie the picture of Elsie, and Elsie is like, well, that's cute. But Colonel Cameron has been sentenced to death, to be hanged as a guerrilla. But because Lincoln is the good buddy that he is, he generously invites Elsie and her mother to Lincoln's little room, and Lincoln orders that this hanging is not to take place. Lincoln and how he is portrayed in this film is rather interesting, because he's portrayed as someone who is friendly towards the Southerners, but then of course as reality happens, it's the Southerners who also kill Lincoln, which starts the whole Ku Klux Klan and the new uprising.
Yeah, the kind of a kind portrayal of Lincoln altogether, it's really rare. to see in the Southern apologist genre of films, whereas Lincoln pretty often in these type of movies he's being depicted as a Satan himself. So I was really surprised to see that Griffith of all people and the Birth of a Nation of all films actually has a largely humane and sympathetic depiction of Lincoln.
Then there's a shot of Appomattox Courthouse in April 1865. And the title card next says that this is the end of state sovereignty. So the soul of Daniel Webster calling to America, quote, the liberty and union one and inseparable now and forever. So the Civil War has ended. This is what I quite didn't understand. One of the daughters of the family puts on this cotton, which is of course valuable, and then what do you do with that valuable stuff? You put some charcoal on it, and you think that's pretty, or what? There's a kind of 100-year gap in understanding this.
It's very easy to understand, except the charcoal.
I guess whatever at your time was valuable, that is something that you are supposed to put on your clothes.
Well, putting cotton on your clothes, that kind of still, that actually makes sense.
Does it?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's meant to be, or it's meant to work as an ornament or decoration on her gown. And kudos where kudos is due, it does actually manage to elevate the gown at least a bit. It like with the added cotton, the gown does look more like what they had previously. These highly decorated dresses that the ladies wore before the ladies wear before the war. They had to sell them all to fund the war. And on that remark, that actually does make sense to me. What doesn't make sense is the goddamn charcoal.
There's a lot of historical dates that are mentioned in the title cards, one of them being April 14th, 1865. And it's mentioned as the fated night of April 14, 1865. And there's a lot of things that I had to fact check and which felt a little overwhelming. You know, there's a big gap here time-wise, and there's a big cultural gap. Things that we as Finns are not really learning in grade school or anything. But then I felt a little bit silly, of course, when checking this, that April 14, 1865, of course, is the day that Lincoln was shot. And
what you didn't get that from the film itself?
I did get that, but when I posted at the title card, I was like, oh, what the hell is this? Let's check this out.
Okay. Good to know, because for a moment I was getting worried.
And we get to the gala performance, and that's where it all went sideways because of one lazy bodyguard who just wanted to enjoy the show.
Yeah, and the Lincoln assassination altogether in the film, I'm kind of baffled exactly how in detail the film goes with the whole assassination, with the title cards actually showing the time and what act of the play is currently going on.
Yeah. Have you seen the Steven Spielberg film Lincoln?
Checked it out once when it was on TV.
Yeah.
I was kind of it's a movie and...
Okay, that's it about that. Stonemans get the information about the assassination, and how South is getting news of the assassination, and it's apparently their best friend. What is to become of us now? I thought kind of a lot of things, because shouldn't you be kind of exhilarated about this news?
No, because in this film's universe, everybody in South was on Lincoln's side, and nobody thought that Lincoln was a piece of shit, and blamed him for the whole Civil War thing, and South succeeded.
Well, it's good that we got it straight.
Yep. This is depiction of historical facts, as Griffith points out.
Yeah, quote, this is an historical presentation of the Civil War and Reconstruction period, and is not meant to reflect on any race or people of today.
Which,
okay,
more than anything in this film, to me, smells like damage control done by Griffith.
Yeah, it looks like a 1921 damage control title card. Because,
Yeah.
well, this doesn't help his case in any way.
It doesn't help his case. Most definitely it doesn't help his case, especially here, because this title card is presented at the end of the first half of the film. And from here on we go into the second half of the film, which, kudos for the film. The second half is way more interesting than the first half, but the second half also is more interesting simply because it's even more racist and even more harmful than the first one.
Well, absolutely, and I can now see actually why Woodrow Wilson was so hyped about this film, because it's quoting Woodrow Wilson in 3 of these title cards, right here, from the history of the American people. One of them is underlined, quote, "Put the white South under the heel of the black South." It's fucking ridiculous.
God damn it, Woodrow. And also the notion that white men were roused by a mere instinct of self-preservation. And that was what caused the existence of Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah, focus is now getting back actually to the Silas Lynch, the mulatto leader of the blacks. Apparently that's what she is in the Stallman family. And at the same time, many people they are forced to recognize the mulatto's position and the black people's position, but of course the Cameron family doesn't take this lightly. There's a really, what I can only describe myself as, at least, as a pretty hilarious shot where this guy is getting very amped up about the fact that he would need to shake hands with this mulatto and refuses to do so. Just a look on his face. Now we see here some of those signs that say the equality, equal rights, equal politics, equal marriage, 40 acres and a mule for every colored citizen. And the title card, quote, "The charity of a generous North, misused to delude the ignorant," end quote. Well, I guess to Griffith's credits, he never said that this would be a balanced interpretation. Except that they said this would be facts.
Yeah, and in here they very clearly kind of mispresent what the amenities to the free men were. Like in Griffith's film, it's been shown that the blacks were given an abundance of stuff, like more stuff than they could need, more stuff than they can even possibly carry, and they were given like top hats and God knows what else by the government.
And now does it happen so that the northern Stallmans are packing their shit and traveling to Piedmont to their buddies, Camerons, something like that? It's happening around 142.
Yeah, for some odd reason, the Daddy-O, whose health has deteriorated since the first half of the film, I don't understand why, but he decides to actually go to the southern warmth and sun with his bad health. Even though you would think that since the film tells you how Daddy-O Stoneman is the radical politician and the not approved politician in the southern perspective, he's even seen as someone who is dangerous in his radical politics. You would think that South would be the last possible location that Stonemans would go to.
But so they do. And, quote, "Pride battles with love for the heart's conquest." So it's now the epic battle between pride and love. Who will win? I noticed that there's a lot of hugging. Hugging this person, hugging that person. I fail to see, I think, any kisses in this film. Must have been a big deal back in the day.
Griffith just would have had to pay his actors extra for kissing.
And the lack of vaccines in those days, you have to be careful what kind of a microbial balance or imbalance you're going to have following a kiss.
I somehow am willing to believe that the people of those times didn't even know about bacteria.
The microscope already invented.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if microscope would have been declared as witchcraft.
Well, naturally, due to the North's failures, the Negroes and carpetbaggers sweep the state, as the title card says. They sweep the state in such of a fashion that they actually take control, 100% control of the courtrooms, and and what seems to be a complete 100% control of the voting system. So actually the white people are pushed off from voting.
A moment which actually telegraphs the appearance of the, I would say, maybe even the most troubling theme of the film, which is the fact that the film depicts blacks as someone who, in the end, will corrupt and disfigure the American democracy. As basically we are being shown in all the courtroom scenes. The blacks altogether, when it comes to after being freed and after being given a foothold in American politics here, in the film are being shown as someone who are unable to kind of let go of their animalistic nature, which I guess is genetically hard-coded in them. Since in all the Senate and all the court scenes that you are repeatedly being shown the blacks incapable of acting well, like the situation would demand.
Yeah, since this was my first time seeing The Birth of a Nation, because I'm a bad cinephile, I was thinking around the halfway, is this some kind of a stupid parody that the director is trying to pull up here? Like telling some kind of a alternative, kind of South glorifying story, but in the essence it being kind of ridiculous in the South and its ideals of those times. But no, it appears to be nothing of that sort. In fact, the director himself was born in Kentucky, good old South, and his father was in the war, fighting on the Confederate side. But the riot in the Masters Hall scene, the courthouse scene, this is one of those key sequences in the entire film. Like, this is what I thought was getting into the complete side of parody, but unfortunately it's not. And it gives you this chaotic look at the courthouse where there is no order, there is no leader in the house, no focus on anyone, so completely out of control, and they are passing all kinds of legislations which are supposed to be bad decisions, like, well, something completely amazing, like that the white people must salute black officers, and I suppose the other way around it would not then work, is what is being suggested here. Anyway, then also interracial marriage is one discussion topic that is they're trying to legislate. And there's ridiculous outnumbering of blacks to whites. But I don't actually see any whites there. I mean, I see the black faces.
You see white in exactly one shot when it comes to the Masters Hall scenes.
Okay.
It's you see the backs of the whites. So there is exactly one shot where you are shown kind of a group of white legislators, like 10 of them or 6, and they are all basically they are all in one group, surrounded by the blacks, and they all seem to be snoozing.
Yeah, one guy eating chicken.
And that really kind of summarizes the whole Masters Hall scenes. Basically, it's racist depictions. It's depictions of it's racist depictions like with the dude eating the chicken, or the another guy who secretly sips whiskey or hooch from his flask as nobody is watching, and it's basically showing the ineffective nature of blacks entering and doing politics in American political system. On top of them, it also plays a hell of a long game with basically the white fears. There's a big part being played about the mixing of races with the basically with the notions of interracial marriage being allowed, that being allowed in the legal context. Also, the whole notion when they are deciding about the interracial marriage, how the scene plays out. The scene is being crosscut from the legislator's side, which is a group of black men leering at white women, and that's basically that's what you are being given in the moment when the film shows you that the interracial marriage law is being passed.
Yeah, yeah. Inaccurate, wrong, and creepy and scaremongering. Can't believe race has been such a big deal at some point.
Well, but then again, race still being big deal even today. And that's, I would say, one of the more worrying aspects when it comes to the birth of a nation is that a lot of these ideas still, even though this kind of a systematical and governmentally accepted hate that you see in birth, even though that has been abolished and you can't be this outrageously hateful, at least openly anymore, but the ideas and fears, they still every now and so often manifest in the modern discourse.
Sure, it's unfortunately also something that is kind of built up in us humans that we more easily accept and identify with somebody or some people who look the same, appear the same, and it's not even that much about that. It's about what kind of people we are living closest to each other, and the kind of people that we tend to regard as the safe zone. So it's kind of a lack of an experience as well. Lack of an exposure to different kinds of races. And something funny happens in 202, and a few seconds later there's one of these Griffith title cards. But the Griffith title card style changes, at least in my copy of the film here, completely, and also the font is different. It's the first title card that I see that it is changing the font and everything. At 2:02:43, then it returns back to normal. It's almost like it was created out of scratch for this release. Now we're starting to get to the Ku Klux Klan. Quote, "We shall crush the white South under the heel of the black South." And that's of course the kind of feelings that all of the blacks shared. That's what the movie suggests.
Well, kind of kudos to the film. That actually might be somewhat accurate. That might actually be somewhat accurate depiction of what South could have actually felt during those times.
Right?
Because South in the end, as being in the losing side and basically losing the whole slavery economy that they had been so dependent on up until then, and kind of having to make at least some remedies for the whole slavery thing after the Civil War. It could actually, I could very well believe that the Southerners themselves would have felt and believed that what it was all about was simply, the blacks raising up and crushing the white man's way of life, or crushing the white South under the heel of black South. Because in a way, for Southerners, that is kind of what happened, or their way of life, which or the part of their way of life which had revolved around slavery and using slave labor. That really did come to an end, and that was crushed.
What I believe happens now is that the lady of the Stallman household breaks off the engagement with the Cameron household's brother because of the racist undertones that she's detecting in this guy. And another title card, over 400,000 Ku Klux costumes made by the women of the South, and not one trust betrayed. Of course not. They're Southerners.
They are basically all Klan members in the South.
Oh yeah. Oh, now we get into this peeping blackface. So this sister of the Stallman family, which I thought was having some kind of a mental instability moments during the house fire, she's
throughout the film altogether.
Pretty much. Not sure what was the actual reason for it. What was she simply laughing because she couldn't contain herself while filming? Like, this is too funny to be filming such of a film. Whichever the case, now this peep in blackface is chasing the lady all over the forest. Something that could be stated for D.W. Griffith's advantage, if you will, in this is that it's never stated out that the blackface would be raping her. No, that's not mentioned anywhere. It's basically he said he's kind of interested in the lady and wants to have some kind of time with her, but it's never established what that is. But clearly he is interested in the lady and follows her around the goddamn forest. It could be that he's like, hey, yo, lady, you forgot your hat here. I'm trying to return it, but you're running away from me. Or it could be that he wants to have some kind of a romantic dinner with the lady. Or thirdly, it might be that he's willing to marry her outright. Or fourthly, it could be that he's really excited to rape her right now, right there in the forest. But then again, it's never stated out, really. It's never stated out.
You're being way too cautious with the film here. Like visuals-wise, the film extremely clearly telegraphs to the audience that rape is what is going to happen.
In any case, what happens here, which cannot be argued, is that this black face is running around in the forest, following her around, and then the lady just decides to jump because she's absolutely convinced that something really bad will happen. This black guy will catch me. Jumps to her death.
Once again, from the leering eye glances that the Gus here takes of the lady, it's pretty obvious that rape is what was on the table on the moment.
Probably. But even without knowing if you would not know the backgrounds of the film, you could make the argument that this guy is just looking for some kind of a romantic dinner here.
I would say that you could make the exactly opposite argument. Like, even if you wouldn't know what is the birth of a nation's reputation and legacy and the problematic racial elements of the film, you would still read that scene as a lady escaping her rapist.
Yeah, well, I think jumping over a cliff was kind of a overkill, but it's definitely overkill as she gets killed. And there's an investigation that happens in some room that has a lot of black people, and there is this very handsome guy who picks up a fight with all the black guys in the room, gets shirtless as well, and Ku Klux Klan find the alleged to be rapist and kill the guy. And the body is dumped in front of the Silas lunch porch. At 2:34, the horse is disturbingly close to the flames sometimes, because the Ku Klux Klan are having some kind of a barbecue party, as they usually do. Scalawag this, scalawag that, carpetbagger this. The blacks are getting out of control, and the Ku Klux Klan has got a note that something needs to be done, so the heroic Klan in the way that it's depicted in this film is now launching their attack against the terrible blackfaces. And Lynch is making his proposal for marriage. Lady is not really warming up to the idea, tries to escape, and that doesn't go anywhere. She breaks the window even, faints twice, and the Klan takes forever to get into the town.
Klan gets into the town surprisingly quickly, seeing how they have to kind of reform all their ranks before they can even leave to the town.
Hence the length of 3 hours for the film.
Well, the length of that 3 hours of the film is basically because the film wastes for the first hour and a half on that pointless love story subplot or the main narrative.
White spies are disguised. There are some internal, external shot play here, and the Ku Klux is getting closer and closer and closer. Finally, there is the attack on the cabin with all guns blazing, and the KKK win the day, while the black people are now scared of the Klansmen who are outside, forcing them to go back to their rooms. We have a bit odd editing here, once again, at 3:11, where you see this guy on a horse with the sword. Now, obviously, the image of the guy has been superimposed over the original image. I mean, the guy is also oversized as hell compared to the rest of the people. He even fades out on his own from the image. And then there's apparently Jesus Christ in the middle of the image as some kind of a ghostly figure. It's hard to know what's going on exactly.
Essentially, it's supposed to be depicting the kind of a spirit of war, which is being banished by the peace that the society and Southern America has now reached thanks to the Klan. And the follow-up image that Jesus amongst the crowd is supposed to be depicting that peace as it kind of descends upon the people.
Oh, of course. And then at 3:12 you have one of these weird two splits where you have the very romantic beach resort over the cliff, which might be one of the best shots of the entire film. And on the left side you see the city landscape. Liberty and union, one and inseparable, now and forever. The end. That was The Birth of a Nation, Henrik. Was it too fast for your tastes?
What do you mean?
We ran through the film quite fast.
Not at all. There really is not that much to cover in scene by scene in Birth of the Nation. There's more to cover in theme and basically in the racist undertones of the film.
Yeah, but it was really interesting to look at a film this old. Of course, everybody really who were working on the film have already died, and the film is from definitely different kind of times. But there's a lot of topics still to discuss. For example, do you think this film should be banned? We also had this kind of a discussion in Gone with the Wind. So, should this kind of a film be banned?
I don't know. It's kind of a hard question. Originally, I've been very strong defender of the free speech, and on that regard, in the past I have been pretty ready to defend even Birth of the Nation or its right to exist, as the heinous as the film is. But looking at the modern times, I would say that it's becoming increasingly difficult to actually say, have we really moved past from the ideas and the sentiments of the peoples of the 1950s? Like, are we really better than what the people of those times were?
Yeah, we are mostly, but there are always exceptions to the rule.
Well, are we? Because I kind of constantly these days I end up running up with the exceptions or the so-called exceptions to the rule.
I don't know if I should say this, but you're living in Rovaniemi after all.
But not just Rovaniemi, like, well, basically globally. Poland itself as a country, while I've been following your news articles and postings from the politics of Poland, it's bleeding into a more and more totalitarian and authoritarian direction as we speak. There's the whole, basically the American discourse, which these days revolve around the concept, should there be a second civil war so that we could, or culling of the weak and undeserving from the nation. There's also there's even the rising fascist and racist undertones in Finnish. So what do you say? Should the film be banned?
No, I'm not really advocating for mostly any banning of any kind. Of course, if we're talking about some kind of, well, you could of course make the juxtaposing of firearms and this film in the sense that you're closer to firearms, you're more likely to shoot the gun. If you're more closely to harmful material, you might pick up the gun and then shoot the children at school. But then again, you can't really ban things, I think, on the basis that there is some part of the general population that is so stupid that they...
I don't know. Then again, it's in the nature of fascism, and fascism is what this film also advocates. That fascism, in the end, it extinguishes all the other forms of dialogue and basically all the other rhetoric except the fascist rhetoric. So when you allow fascist speak, you also play with the gamble that all the other speak will be extinguished by the fascists.
No, it's important to have these kind of things out there for educational purposes. Like you said, this film is reflecting of some of the views that people held at the time. And for that reason, it's kind of like the Gone in the Wind, that it's kind of a time capsule into the problems of people's views of those times.
But for that to actually hold water, that would also mean that people would be able to learn from all these examples and all these films.
Yeah,
more than that, be able to learn the right lessons from the films.
Yeah, well, I think it's something that nowadays you can't make a film of this type. So it's not like there's gonna be like a new wave of this kind of a propaganda anytime soon. Of course, we have the internet now, so also in that sense, I guess anything can happen. But I'm not advocating for The Birth of a Nation to be played on any national TV or TV at all, but I think people should have access to it for historical purposes. and
But
educational purposes.
if you're not advocating for national TV, if you're not advocating for open presentation of the film, that on its own right also is a form of soft censorship. That's also limiting people's ability to actually find and see and experience the picture.
Perhaps, yeah. I feel a little bit uncomfortable about the fact that some people, some couch potatoes, would be able to have the easiest possible access to watching this film on TV. So to make it a little bit more complicated, that you actually have to buy it or buy it on iTunes or wherever it's available. It's a better approach, in my opinion.
So since you actually feel uncomfortable with the idea of people being easily finding out this film or having the possibility of seeing this film too easy for some, as you put it, couch potatoes, does it mean that do you how do you put it then? How much do you actually believe that we humans as a race have actually advanced from the times of 1950?
Well, when it comes to, if you ask from like the leftist Finns, they would probably say that, well, we have made a lot of development, but we are not even remotely there where we should be when it comes to racial relations. I agree, but there is also this kind of I think what is an illusion that there has not been any fundamental advancements since the slavery or something like that, and that's obviously false. For example, we don't pull off any of these kind of films anymore. We don't have like open support for Ku Klux Klan. We don't separate the races. We don't, at least officially. And there's generally less racism in the world. But probably, yeah, you're trying to drive towards the point that there's more silent racism, or kind of a more nuanced racism, if you will, if that makes any sense. It's in people's eye contact, on this, all of these small gestures. Microaggression, micro-racism.
More than microaggression and micro-racism, what I'm kind of wondering is there, has the racism still just only find a new way to hide itself? Like we do and pass on open limitations on racism. We denounce Ku Klux Klan, and we set up legislations that are, on their core, they are meant to abolish racism and kind of soothe in the racial politics. But is that only a surface level action? And is it so that when you go to the message boards, is there still the same racist intent and same racist rhetoric? Is it still very much alive there? Like,
yes, but we have to discuss.
We just created soapboxes and bubbles where basically we can still uphold these same kind of mentalities that play part in birth of the nation. Now we have only transported them to the message boards.
Yeah, of course, that still is living and doing fine, the racism. We have to discuss the amounts of in which we see it, or which it exists. And I would say that the public opinion has changed course immensely since 1915. Of course, once again, the leftist politics would probably tell you in cases otherwise. And I would say that the biggest advocator of racism is actually the leftist politics at this moment. I just follow what I'm seeing on the campuses, for example. I'm following what people write for reputable news sources like the New York Times. Of course, I can't just right now give you some sources to look at, but it's pretty clear that there's this attitudes that are inflaming people to join these radical groups because they do not agree with the popular ideas of the moment, that somehow whatever they do, they are to be vindicated, they are always wrong, and somehow this is kind of just putting again some racial tensions into places where racial tensions shouldn't be in the first place. Like putting somebody and saying that, well, you can't ever be right because I have a black skin tone. This is the kind of rhetoric that is going to launch the new fucking Ku Klux Klans. And if you're a certain kind of person that's going to enflame you and you want to join some kind of a Ku Klux Klan.
And all that, to me, simply sounds like people are giving too much credit and too much thought on simple newspaper column. Because that's what that actually sounds to me like, those statements that you have come across. Newspaper column writing. And newspaper columns have always not been A, real news, and 2, always have aimed to be kind of a extravagant, a little bit out there, pushing the boundary and pushing your buttons, so to speak.
I wish that were the case, but if you look at the politics even globally, the great shift into far-right politics I see is a direct result of the leftist politics but they are picking some kind of a ideological nonsense that is starting to eat up the people, and they are looking for some kind of a change.
And once again, you are using word politics.
Which is really important in this discussion.
Which is really important in this discussion. And because of that, I honest to God, I need you to define the politics here. Like, I need you to present me the political decision made by a political party in place where politics is being made that states that white person can't ever actually understand the black perspective.
Well, you can look at just even the home politics, and some of the people that identify as leftist-minded, they often might have these ideas that I have discussed here.
Once again, I need an example of this. Because this actually sounds awful a lot like seeing boogeymen in the dark corners.
Sir is sure, and then shows me some kind of evidence as well of why the politics have shifted in such a tremendous way in, for example, the last 5 years. What do you think is the root cause for all of this? For example, the British now willing to get rid of the EU.
Well, Brits have always been willing to get rid of the EU, or that has been the driving sentiment ever since the Thatcher years. Basically, now that the majority of population came behind Brexit in leave or stay vote, but the driving force there was, in my opinion, A, populism, pure and simple, and B, the fact that, well, the stay party kind of fumbled the entire election.
Yeah, the populism.
Completely. The question was proposed entirely wrong. You can't, in my opinion, you can't take the whole, should we leave the European Union or should we stay in it, and simply kind of push it down on 2 questions, leave or stay. It just doesn't work. And on top of that, the stay party also failed completely in informing and telling people about what is European Union and what it does and what it means for the Brits. And if you want to look at even further, I would say there is a third element which actually comes from the British homeland politics, and the fact that there has been a great many people who have felt that they have been left behind the British system on its own. They felt abandoned, and they felt that the government and the legislative body in Britain didn't take their concerns and their feelings seriously enough, didn't pay any attention, any eye to them. And that kind of got transformed into a sense that we have to do something drastic to take back the quote-unquote control, and B, it also transformed into a kind of a leave attitude and hatred towards the EU, because these people weren't entirely sure which was the party that failed to pay any attention to them. Who actually left them behind. So when they were proposed with a question, hey, here's this EU element, should we leave or stay? In that moment, their hostilities that they in reality felt towards the government and the British legislative elite, it got mixed, and they instead targeted towards the EU.
But what was the source for these populistic ideas? Where did they come from? How did they get more ammo to take over the most of the Europe and the politics of the world? That I would also put into the main fault of and shortcomings of the leftist politics, unfortunately.
I'm not talking about populistic ideas in Britain or global populistic ideas.
Well, the populistic ideas globally that we're seeing right now. The common failing in all of these countries to discuss from the point of view of what they do know instead of some fumbled, put together ideas.
Well, that's kind of been going on in politics basically since the birth of politics.
Forever, yes.
Populism has been within politics ever since the fucking ancient Rome. For God's sake, we haven't really invented any new problem. We are simply repeating something that has been problem in basically every form of government and governmental control since basically governments became a thing.
Yeah, the main point here was that somehow due to this heavy history of the United States, they have like a huge baggage when it comes to any kind of race relations discussions, and sometimes the way that they talk about it, it's starting to get even pretty humorous aspects, where it's just overpronounced in the whole discussions. Looking at the far from Finland, it's like you look at these discussions and it's just something that it's not. It's something that doesn't even happen here. It wouldn't go that way in Finland. I feel that we are way ahead in this discussion. I'm saying that in the States, the two races, so to speak, are juxtaposed too much against each other when they should be actually doing the opposite. But with some of the leftist politics, I keep saying politics, but some of the leftist...
Yeah, you keep saying politics, and it's really nagging me, all this politics, when you are not giving me an example on the politics. Like you offer me student groups.
Well, let's just say attitudes. There are some attitudes that lead to this overpronouncement of race, whereas in Finland we don't have the similar problems anymore, or never even really had. But somehow
you mean on race or in general?
On race. I'm only talking about race.
Well, we never had enough race in Finland to actually deal with that, to actually face that problem.
Maybe.
If you want a Finnish example of similar type of situation and similar type of attitudes against a group in Finland, and them performing publicly and I'm kind of guessing what you were aiming at with your race group argument, but just look at the gay pride. That's open and loud, and it's
and accepted for the most part, yeah.
By a closed group, which is to present that closed group, and it actually has led into a hate-filled counter-reaction.
Whatever is happening in Finland in those scenes, there are some of these little advocates of different kind of narrative, but it's nothing compared to what you have, for example, in Poland, where you really have some rocks thrown around you, or you have some gas or some questionable police antics. But for the most part, it's going just fine in Finland. I feel that it's just baffling to me sometimes what you hear from the States, that they are still discussing this with such of a passion, unfortunately, because it is.
Well,
really...
why shouldn't they be discussing about this with passion?
It just feels that it's there's some kind of a split black and white, and that is making the problem in itself in this fucking country.
Because in some on some level, realities between black and white, they do actually exist. They exist between each basically every single group.
Mm-hmm.
I as a straight person, I can't ever clearly see the gay perspective. I can't walk in your shoes. That's why we have to communicate. That's why you have to tell me what it's like to be a gay person, what it's like to be a gay person in Poland.
Yeah, and at the same time, you're a human being. You understand that some people are different amongst us, and that's kind of the fundamental that you just need to understand to survive and to keep peace in society.
Yeah. So the point was, you have to understand that there are different realities between gay and straight, between black and white.
Well, that's kind of the thing, because yes and no. What do you have there? You have a skin color difference. You have maybe tonal differences in voice. If that's hard to overcome, then oh my god, what can I say? And that's the problem that you have in the United States. And that's what they need to talk about.
But we still are against the left. Just so that we are clear on at least on one thing on this discussion, because by jolly is this for me at least really hard to follow.
Yeah, because
but boo left. Or...
Because when I say that left has been an integral part in fucking up the politics around the world, it doesn't mean that the left is completely bad and unable to do its job.
Well, you kind of are, because you just said that they fucked up the politics.
Yeah, they did.
They are unable to do their job, and they are actually kind of bad, either willingly or unwillingly, but they fucked up the entire world and the politics.
Yeah, I don't see the problem with that argument. There's nuances to these things. It's not just that they have done that, they also have a lot of politics that I agree with.
But they fucked up the world. Like that is pretty bad on its own right. Like if I would fuck up the world would be fucked up and you would live in the world. So I would have fucked up your life, right? Because I fucked up the world. This is kind of the reason why I tried why I'm asking for examples and why I try to be precise here. Because if the world has been fucked up, as you said, leftists have fucked up the world. That means that the world is being fucked up, so your life has been fucked up. So what is the good thing in leftists then? You are completely fucked.
Like I said, there's a lot of nuances to this.
Well, this starts to sound awfully like Griffith nuances.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Like situation is fucked beyond control, but so they are the bad guys, right?
It's not like in the movies, Henrik, where somebody does some bad deed that is really bad, and then I don't agree with them at all on any level. So that's what it boils down to.
Because this discussion started with you not agreeing with them at all in any level.
No, not true at all. Nope.
You started with how leftist politics, which you still haven't presented an example, have basically caused the rise of the right-wing politics.
Mm-hmm.
And will cause some kind of a future calamity, and also have fucked up the world, which was the latest.
What are you looking for here? Tell me.
I'm looking for your perspective here. Like I honest to God, I don't have any ulterior motives here.
Me neither.
I'm merely trying to find, see, and understand your perspective.
Well, you see, there are simply just some leftist politics that have been problematic and which have not been based on very scientific material, which have made a big outrage in many countries, which has led to the dominion of the right-wing politics. I can give you one glimpse of where I'm going for. For example, what is pretty popular, or has been popular for the States for some time, which is now garnering some fame also in Europe, is the concept of safe spaces. You can put somebody in a safe space just to separate this person from the rest of the group as a way to shelter them, as a way to just avoiding the other person's views effectively. You provide a safe space from the other views of other people, or you can outright ban some conferences because somebody has other points of view, many of which I do not agree with at all, but just outright banning them and not giving them a possibility to voice their opinion. And that's what really, really worries me. That's what the left side has been doing for some time, and this is what has been giving a lot of minus points for them and more votes for Trump.
But safe spaces themselves are nothing more than, places created for individuals feel marginalized. We are not really talking about any kind of a big deal here. We are talking about some place, like some space, somewhere, where a group of marginalized people or people who feel they are marginalized, they can come together. It can be a broom closet, it can be a table in a cafeteria, It may even be temporarily, like you and your marginalized friends come around in cafeteria and sit around one table. That's a place for people who feel marginalized. And or then you can have a kind of a created and kind of a more long-lasting safe space, like for example clubhouse in broom closet or somewhere like that, and that is essentially a safe space.
Yeah, so whenever somebody says something that is apparently, in your opinion, it's hurting you. Let's say I say that in my opinion, women should not have brunette hair. So you get offended. So this discussion is shut down because one person feels offended and needs to find a safe space at the moment. So that's the kind of idea I get from the environment of the United States politically right now.
But the discussion in the United States hasn't been shut down. You yourself admitted that it's actually going on very vigorously even as we speak. Even too vigorously, because you actually made the notion that they talk about it too much.
Yeah, actually, maybe they should be talking about even more, because for fuck's sake, you can't even have when it comes to birth of a nation, you can't even have a fucking discussion about the birth of a nation publicly in that fucking country. You know where they had the Blu-ray interview for the BFI regarding the birth of a nation? They had to come to Britain. There were about maybe 2/3 representation of American professors, and they had to travel to the UK to have this discussion because nobody wants to have a panel of any kind about the birth of a nation, which saddens me because that's exactly where the discussion should be happening. There was an event, 100 years of the birth of a nation, or something like this, that the conference was called, where there were about 5 or 6 professors that were from different universities, mostly from the US, discussing the birth of a nation and its implications and problems and what does it mean to the world today. And that was really interesting. But it's just saddening to see that this discussion was not able to take place in its home country, where it should be taken like bull by the horns. What is the situation now, 100 years on? So
not knowing the event itself, not having not seen, or even heard about this event myself. It's really hard to comment on this, or to really say what happened and why.
Okay. It was just one example of many that I have encountered where there are insane levels of sensitivities towards these discussions, which is a bad thing in this case, where you're supposed to solve some of the problems that you have in these race relations, and then you're not able to do that. Anyway, fun times. Would it be the quickies?
Well, yeah, unless you will continue this in a lighter discussion, of course we can go to the quickies.
Yeah, thank you for pushing me on a subject that I have not prepared on any level.
It's a subject that you yourself started. You brought up the topic. I merely tried to have, a discussion about it in that quick on live style that you want.
Yeah, then as usual, if there's some kind of topic that you don't like, then you keep pushing with it for 45 minutes, but that's fine.
Who said I don't like the topic? No, seriously, who? Because I have a disagreement with that guy.
Who's that?
The guy who said I don't like the topic. Do we have a third person on this conversation? Do we have to disperse the Discord server now? Is Greg sending you messages?
Honestly, don't know what's going on anymore at this hour. Favorite performance?
Would be my Marsh in this film. Plays a complete loof.
I don't know. I like the lady who was laughing when the house was on fire.
Yeah, that was my Marsh.
Okay, so my Marsh then. Favorite scene?
Siege of the Cabin.
I like house fires. Favorite quote?
Former enemies of the North and South are united again in common defense of their Aryan birthright. Because that's what the whole Yahoo in the end is all about. About feeling of right, of feeling that something belongs to you, simply on the virtue of you being part of something. sexual orientation, gender, or in here, race. But basically the notion that simply you, through your association to this something, in film's case, the race, you automatically are entitled. And you don't have to work and you don't have to better yourself, because why would you? You are already covered because you have your birthright.
I kind of like the poetic nature of this quote. While youth dances the night away, childhood and old age slumber. Luckily this had nothing to do with politics or views of any kind really, so I like it. It has aged better than most of the film.
Well, yeah, the quote, yeah. You are aware that the scene itself is politically charged, right?
Right. Everything
okay.
is.
Yeah, just checking, because I'm still trying to find the mysterious third person on the Discord channel.
No, it's probably related to something politically loaded, but I honest to God don't even remember the place where in the movie where this part was. So, but since it's the birth of a nation, it's easy to see that it's politically loaded.
It was in the Southern Halls, if I remember correctly.
Okay. Favorite kill. Good luck.
Would be Marsh jumping to her goddamn death out of that cliff.
Yep.
Yeah, your work, your turn. No, you can pick your favorite lynch black person.
Yeah, it's the same death as yours, and it looks.
You're cheap shotting yourself through this, man.
No, I'm not. It's a pretty.
Yeah, you're proposing me the question, and then you're just the same answer.
But definitely, it's like a long shot of the cliff, and then you see her falling, and actually it looks pretty realistic when she tumbles down. It doesn't look like a ragdoll or anything. It just looks too real. But random confusing question, Henrik. Go ahead.
Seriously, man, who is the mysterious third person in the Discord channel who said that I don't enjoy the conversation? I'm still trying to find the guy.
Well, I'm doing the claim because you are getting so defensive here about the whole discussion. I'm just trying to be here as neutral as possible.
But you I mean, what? I mean, you didn't start the discussion neutral to begin with. It was outright accusation.
Maybe I put a little bit of color into it. You know, you have to have a little bit of spice in this podcast, but I really, really, really don't have any strong feelings towards any political narratives. I'm just picking out the best parts of what politics should be for me. So no, I'm not standing on the right, I'm not standing on the left, I'm not standing on the center. I'm standing on my own. Thank you very much.
But you're opposing the left.
No, I'm not.
Because that was where you started the discussion. Left has fucked up all the
things. I'm saying that it has fucked up a lot of things, but it doesn't then mean that I will completely oppose the left politics. That's how probably that's what the average voter thinks. And I don't understand why you're bringing this kind of approach into the conversation. That's what the average voter thinks. Okay.
Because that was your basically starting argument.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm more nuanced than that. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, naturally, seriously, of course. There are faults to each of these sides in the political spectrum. So if I say that there's one thing, albeit huge thing, that they have fucked up in the politics in the last years, in Finland, in the United States, for example, Poland, it doesn't mean that I would choose the right side because of that. Nope.
No, but you indirectly, like this is why it got so interesting for me, the discussion, because you indirectly hinted that the American left has caused the right to rise in Poland. Like, you are being stoned in Poland because of the leftist in America. And that, honest to God, I do find that kind of an interesting concept.
Okay.
I would like to like really study that concept, like how that works.
It works in the way that in the public eye, the politics of the United States have a hell of a lot of visibility, and that alone allows the politics to spread widely, and the feelings and the views towards the leftist politics, which are of course different all around the world in some way or another. But a lot of this that you see of the rhetoric, how the leftist politics work, etc. There are influences from the politics of the United States, and Poland being a close ally of the NATO, being a close ally of the States, and supporting of the Donald Trump's presidency, at least when you go ask for the dominating party here. In many aspects, they have some similar politics. That's something that influences the politics here.
And this is precisely where I would actually need an example on the actual leftist politics.
I think that's something that we can pick up on some other podcast.
Yeah. Well, fine. But you know, just you know, I'm not opposed to this discussion as you claimed. On the contrary, I'm extremely interested in this discussion. I'm actually trying to have the discussion here still right now in random confusing question. on the first note that you gave me that I can once again run away with whatever I wanted. I wanted to go with the discussion, and you are shutting me down. So first image that comes to your mind. Then, if we are not gonna have the discussion,
Donald Trump, House in Flames.
Okay, my choice is John Wilkes Booth in that close up on the theater scene.
Mm-hmm. What pulled you out?
That the fact that the first hour and a half is so mind-numbingly boring, like Jesus Christ. It's the first half of the film doesn't work at all. It does get more interesting on the second half, but it gets interesting for all the wrong reasons. It gets interesting because it gets so outright graciously racist, but most definitely the first half doesn't work. It takes forever, and you'll be bored out of your skull during the first 30 minutes of it.
Yeah, something like that. This is, of course, something that you need to put also in a context, that this is something that was blowing everybody's minds in 1915. And, well, I guess I can't just put my mind into 1915 context perfectly ever, because I have not lived through that age. But even then, if I would try to play this little bit of a role play, I think this first half just... When they were making silent films, they weren't exactly still making the scenes very tight in a way. It wasn't even necessarily the goal. The goal was just to put images together and show the audience how cool it is. And just going to the theater itself was an experience in itself. So not a lot of attention, I think, was paid on the scenes, in the sense that how long they are taking, if they bumble on, or if we're having enough different shot sizes. But anyway, it stands that the first half of it is quite numbingly boring, and then it gets to the second half, like you said, for all the wrong reasons. It's pretty exciting, but I have to give credit for Griffith for being able to actually make it somewhat exciting, once again for the wrong reasons, but it's not bad storytelling in the second half.
Now, I would say it's still bad storytelling also.
You mean in the content, or how it's technically composed?
How it's technically composed. Like, this film has also major technical issues. It has pacing issues. The characters are paper thin. They're one-dimensional at best. The love story, which still carries over in the second half, doesn't work at all. There's also the fact that the glance during the second half are kind of founded just like that on the snap of your fingers. They started up, after Cameron gets the idea from two kids, kind of hilarious on its own right. But you know, from there, all of a sudden they are militia, 10,000 strong. Like it. When it comes to the storytelling, the second half also it has major mechanical fumblings.
Yep. What pulled you in?
The scale, more notably on the battlefield scene.
I guess the biggest things that pulled me in were just marveling at some of the trick shots. Pretty nice. And the score. The score is really good. It was pleasant to listen to. That's all I can say with my excellent skills as a musician.
Oh, it just tuned out the score. Like, it just became white noise for me.
In a way, but I think it complemented the moments really well. Now, what would you change in the film? here's your scissors for the sacrilege, which might not be so sacrilegious this time.
The first thing to go would be the first half. What little there is salvage, and that most definitely is a little, I would transport to the second half, and well, basically from there on, I would kind of, at this point, I would leave it at that. When it comes to this quick category, when it comes to really fixing the film, it becomes like a real nightmare's workplace. You would have to fix the pacing and the characters and the storytelling altogether. Ditch the love story almost entirely. If not entirely, you would have to tinker with the political elements or the political plot hell of a lot more to make it work. You kinda, I would say you would also have to, try to fix the Ku Klux Klan plot or the moment in narrative.
I think so.
And, it would be so much work that it soon would become the case that just would have to axe the entire film.
Yeah, if we were to follow somewhat D.W. Griffith's visionary vision still here with the scissors, then I would try to make the first half of the film faster, more concise, maybe make some few title cards that explain a little better where we're going here. How did you get the picture? How are you so obsessed now about the lady? And more juxtaposition between these families maybe. But then on a wider scale, yeah, these problematic elements here, I don't know. I would have to cut the entire film to pieces. But hey, you really know you're watching The Birth of a Nation when?
You yourself dress up as a scary ghost for Halloween.
Oh, you do that kind of things. Well, you really know you're watching The Birth of a Nation when you see Ku Klux Klan riding on horseback. You don't see that stuff every day. Or Ku Klux Klan to begin with. Actually, this is the one of two films that the director has with the Ku Klux Klan. In the other short film, actually, the Ku Klux Klan is portrayed as an antagonist. 3 adjectives to describe the film.
Innovative, historically accurate, and not racist.
Okay. Misguided, racist, historical.
You just weren't listening to Griffith and his title.
Pardon me. You weren't able to sign me on to the KKK just yet.
I still have time, man. I still have time. Just wait for the next week's movie.
Which is a ghost story.
Yeah?
Yeah, carrying on with the white clothing.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. Completely lost me there.
Did you look at your watch?
Most definitely. Like the first half of the film, the hour and a half love story part, is nothing more than you checking your watch. Like constantly. It does ease up on the second half. Like I said, once all the really racist stuff comes to the forefront and you have all the rape threats and all that going on. But yeah, the first half of the film, it's insufferable.
Very good. Yeah, I looked at my watch as well. Mostly on the second half of the film, which is very slow.
The second half?
On the first half, excuse me.
Okay, just checking.
Would you recommend The Birth of a Nation?
I don't know. I honest to God, I don't know with this one. There's a multitude of factors to take in with when choosing to recommend or not recommend film. The first one is, can you recommend it? Is it perhaps still too influential? Can you really put enough faith on your fellow man to trust that he can kind of just watch the film and it won't lead into a complete mess of problems as a result? I was originally going to give a go around answer to the question and simply say that perhaps not to the Western audiences because there's really nothing to see, for example, Europeans in The Birth of a Nation, but maybe American American audiences can look at the film and see how far they've come. But I don't know, that notion is kind of being tested by the reformation of, or attempts of reformation of the KKK lines in real life.
But if you go with the Gone with the Wind logic, then you would not recommend this, even though it has some views of its times very visible here, and I think for educational purposes that would be quite as needed as Gone with the Wind.
Gone with the Wind had two things on its side. The first one was that the original intent was good. The Selznick was not trying to make KKK endorsing hate black people film. He was trying to do the exact opposite. Selznick was, during the production of the film, Selznick was increasingly afraid that Gone with the Wind might be misinterpreted and it might accidentally reinvigorate the clan or hurt the black feelings. So that's the first thing. The second one is that when it comes to Gone with the Wind, when it comes to film language, when it comes to text, when it comes to what the film argues, in the end it ends up arguing completely against the values that are presented to you in The Birth of a Nation. So on that sense, Gone with the Wind actually can still somehow be a film that teaches you something.
Yeah, for example, marital rape.
You are surprisingly hung up with the rape.
Am I?
Yeah. I'm surprised that you brought it up again. I was actually surprised that it was the second notion that you made in the short description of the episode in the Facebook. Because yeah. I was kind of surprised that from the 2 highlight points, that was the second one.
Because it sells well.
Yeah. I don't know if it's, I didn't check how many clicks we got with rape notion. But still, it's not trying to teach you to rape. For heaven's sake, man. Don't get so hung up on one scene. In fact, like I tried to say in that episode, in Gone with the Wind, the rape scene actually works as a way to condemn Red Butler. And it also works as a scene that showcases Red Butler's moral compass, because Red Butler in the end acknowledges in the actual right next morning that what he did was wrong and he should actually leave Scarlet as a result.
The fuck it was. Red Butler may be sorry after that little drinking, but he in no moment ever says that he was sorry about the rape exactly. Well, it could be.
He came to apologize. And after that, he actually proposed to Scarlet that they divorce.
And this is important. It's not indicated anywhere that these two things are related. It's just that Red Butler has had enough and he's happy to end the marriage, which has been a catastrophe for him for all that time.
I would say that really was indicated by the fact that the whole moment starts with Red Butler coming and apologizing what happened last night, meaning the rape.
Yeah, maybe let's grant that, but then again, breaking up the whole marriage, I think, had nothing to do with the rape.
Well, I would say it most definitely had, since it goes like Red Butler comes, apologizes for the rape, makes bad excuses, but apologizes still and acknowledges that his apologies are not enough in face of the rape, and then immediately says that maybe we should divorce.
Yeah, and actually Scarlett was only enjoying that rape the next morning, so I don't know. That is glorifying rape, pretty much.
Well, but, if you take that and condemn the movie on basis of that...
Not only.
What else is there? Because women enjoying being raped or showing the very next morning that they found the experience still pleasant, even though they were hesitant at first. It basically ties down most of the movies that have rape as an element. In fact, it's cast a hell of a lot of movies in really bad light. One could say that really works as an counter argument against, for example, the Bond films. So should we also, condemn and abolish those?
We shouldn't abolish anything. Just saying what the Gone with the Wind has obviously done wrong here.
But I still do argue that it didn't do wrong.
It didn't do wrong glorifying rape. It didn't do wrong by just getting Get Butler out of the trouble. I'm just gonna break up with you. too bad that it's just something that happens, sometimes, darling, I might rape
if
you.
it's such a problem to you, like the way how Hollywood handles rape.
Of course it is.
Okay, then how do you deal with all them Bond movies? Like, serious question. Because they have the basic same element.
Yeah, they do. I'm not saying anything against that.
So, are they also advocating rape culture?
Yep, they are.
Well, shouldn't we then be against Bond movies? For advocating rape culture. Rape being kind of bad, still. I mean, I'm just asking...
Like I said, this rape is not the only factor that was bothersome in Gone with the Wind. But anyway.
please. Once again, like with the leftist politics question, I'm seriously, I'm curious and interested to follow this discourse. So if you are willing, please, give me the next example.
Well, the depiction of course, the slaves being very happy and content in their position as being slaves.
Yeah, that was really problematic from the Gone perspective. I would say that was perhaps the biggest mistake that the film made, and it was a major mistake.
Or showing the Northerners as some kind of a bad entity that is going to take over the South and the prosperity and peace of the South, which is complete horseshit. And then there's some black guy with a top hat saying something very, very impolite towards the Southerners as he goes by with his horse carriage.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
But I'm not saying that you shouldn't see Gone with the Wind at the same breath.
But I would still maintain that Gone with the Wind is nowhere near when it comes to the film being thematically quote unquote bad and arguing the wrong things and championing the wrong perspectives. I would say Gone with the Wind is nowhere near the same ballpark as The Birth of a Nation. I would actually say that Gone with the Wind, even with those problematic elements, Gone with the Wind still is very much anti-Birth of the Nation.
Well, maybe it is, or maybe it's just the director wanting to hide something that could be controversial. It doesn't have to say that the producer wasn't a supporter of the KKK club.
Like you meaning that Selznick, who produced Gone with the Wind, was supporting KKK?
No. Theoretically speaking, because they only left out the KKK because the sensitivities had changed and they couldn't use it. Maybe they would have if they could have.
I would still pretty strongly argue against that one. Like I said, I think I feel that Gone with the Wind is very open about the fact that it does not endorse KKK or it doesn't endorse racism.
Carpetbaggers.
Once again, it is problematic, yeah, but it also paints the Southern rebellion in a bad light. It shows it as a wrong move. It shows that the Southern gentlemen were nothing but, hypocritical hotheads who wanted to actually start the fight with the North.
It's a really weird movie. Sometimes it's like the director wants to be in support of the South sentiments, and sometimes it's like it's not, and it's like a parody of all of the Southern sentiments. And sometimes the Birth of a Nation felt like that as well, but then it becomes crystal clear that this guy actually really is supportive of these things that are seen in the title cards.
Yeah, and that is the main kind of distinction that I have between the Birth of a Nation and Gone with the Wind. To me, Gone with the Wind is a movie that had noble and good intentions, and for most part did reach those intentions. What Gone with the Wind, however, ended up doing is it, in few instances, it really fumbled it. It fumbled it really bad, which results in a film that is not as strong and is not as whole as it could have been. It's a film that, in my opinion, very strongly kind of condemns the Southern rebellion and shows you that the Southerners were kind of a selfish pricks altogether, or at least a plantation owner. But it also fumbles this point by the carpetbaggers scene and the way how it depicts slavery. But I would say that Gone with the Wind still had its heart in the right place. It just had a bad execution at times. The Birth of a Nation, on the other hand, to me is a film which is heart really is in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And it really tries to advocate its black heart to you.
But Henrik, would you recommend this kind of a insane story?
Like I said, it's hard to say. When it comes to the Americans, it comes down to putting your faith in the fellow man, trusting that they can have a distinction between what is real and what is not, and they understand that you shouldn't take any wild ideas from the film, and that should be given. That of course it's gonna play out like that. Of course, modern audiences can understand it. Of course, modern audiences won't sympathize and won't empathize a film like The Birth of a Nation. And then you see the voter ID discussion. Then you see the calling for the Second Civil War. Then you see all these radical ideas. And you kind of start to wonder, like, have we really moved past all that? Have we become better as a race? Good enough that we can kind of stand watching The Birth of a Nation? And then you kind of have to also ask, exactly who would you recommend The Birth of a Nation? Because Birth of a Nation on its own right, it's damn boring film. Like, god damn it, mind-numbingly boring it is. And it, like mentioned, it has problems. And not just thematical problems, but film engineering, the pacing, the characters, the plot lines, all of that. So who would you then recommend boring black and white film? You can't really recommend this to any casual film viewer as a film that you can pop up on the film night, because if you put this one into your DVD player, it's 30 minutes max, and your friend is already on mobile checking on Netflix.
Maybe you have to break it down to smaller pieces and then kind of combine it together and see what the outcome is. Like, for one, you could ask yourself, would you recommend this for historical reasons? Or did you like it? I guess you have to put those things together at least.
No, I didn't like it. I detested its politics, its political views.
And technically?
Technically, I didn't like it. I was bored out of my goddamn mind. So, no, I didn't enjoy watching The Birth of a Nation. When it comes to historical-wise, I really can't see why I would recommend the film. Because when it comes to being innovative in film techniques, when it comes to being some kind of a groundbreaker in engineering of cinema, it's beaten. The Swedes beat it, the Italians beat it, female directors beat it. The techniques have all been used even before The Birth of a Nation. So, historical-wise, no. Also, the only reason I would say to check out this film would be because of the discussion you can have around and resulting from the film. Discussion like we have had tonight. I would say that's the only thing that The Birth of a Nation really has to give to you. The chance to kind of look back at what was America's relationship to race, and then talk about or use that and try to decipher what America's relationship to race might be today and how the two might correlate. How much of the 1950s you still see in America's racial policies today? Do you see it in the institutional discrimination? Do you see it in the police violence? Do you see it in the talks or the discourse that's going on in forum posts? And do you see it in Trump election? But that whole endeavor, like watching over 3 hours of a black and white silent film, which is not as smart as it wants you to believe, and which has really heinous policies in it, simply so that you can have a discussion. That's basically a film geek stuff. Like a goddamn film buff. That's something for two guys who are sad and lonely and host a film podcast. So I guess, I recommend those. If you're sad and pathetic film podcaster, and you can cheat someone to have a discussion with, then watch The Birth of a Nation.
But
if not, don't bother.
Henrik, in this podcast, you have the responsibility to give the recommendation or non-recommendation, kind of fitting all the different racial groups and age groups and all the kind of different minorities and majorities. For all of those together, would you recommend The Birth of a Nation collectively?
So when in this podcast have we actually taken that responsibility? Because we have given these kind of lukewarm recommendations before here.
We have. But then again, if you say here you recommend it or don't recommend it, it has to be. So is that which is going to apply for the rest of the world? So you have recommended it for sad and pathetic and lonely film podcasters.
Which is a fringe recommendation, which I've been allowed to give here on the podcast before in previous episode. So are you...
My bad.
Okay. I'm still not following, but...
Well, at least on my part, I'm trying to give here a recommendation that best suits for the entire human race. So, what about that part?
Entire human race. I don't know why. I can't just stay with fringe recommendation, but, fine. No, it's too boring. The rest of the human race, like, if you are not sad and pathetic film podcaster, I would say you don't have the stamina and you don't have the interest to actually see through this film. And the fact is that you have way more better usage for your time. Spend over 3 hours watching this film.
Yeah, we have said already quite a lot of things about the technical side. We have already broken down to pieces the supposed merits of D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation. We can see these filming techniques already taking place in previous works, some of them even made almost 15 years before The Birth of a Nation. So it doesn't have the firsts in technical merits. Maybe some of those grandiose battles, as we discussed, might be some of the firsts here. And so, since it doesn't really have that technical firsts, and it doesn't really have a kind of it's like you said, its heart is in the wrong place altogether. And it's 3 hours, 11 minutes long, black and white, silent film. So it's hard to believe that. I think it's not probably worth of your time. Because the only thing that would probably be worth of your time, I think, as you already said, is that if you want to see the kind of advancements in silver screen of how we depict race relations, if you are interested in seeing Ku Klux Klan on your screen in an old film, then suppose this film is your calling. But as mentioned, how the whole story is put together, I don't think it's very engaging. Definitely not for the first half of it. Of course, there's also the fact that this is something that has been raised on the public eye because it has had a big budget. It was one of the firsts, at least, or even the first of this magnitude in cinema history, with such of a budget and such of a grandiose production. You can see it for those merits. But then again, I think this film is kind of on a loose footing for the aforementioned reasons, so I would recommend this film outright. No.
Okay, so what's the next week's shouting match?
What was that film that you were suggesting once again? Castorama, Boliorama, Bulimia.
Bulimia sounds about right.
Coriolanus, that's the one.
Okay, yeah, well, that's gonna be a lot of shouting also.
Is it? Wonderful. I suppose you're talking about the one that has been made in the 2000s, not some of that old stuff.
What, are you now discriminating against the old stuff?
Yeah, I'm just saying in the sense of popularity, this newer edition is more known.
So now we are chasing after a cheap popularity. I'm really disappointed in you, man. Like, where's the prestige? Where's the passion? Is it really so that one silent film was enough to break you when it came to the old stuff? And now we are all about, the prish and bang new stuff that is popular.
No. Once we get rid of your stuff, then I'm sure we get back to the underground, the gritty filmmaking that most of the people on this planet have not seen. Get rid of your popular films.
Well, don't worry. It really is the 2011 modern and popular film for your viewing pleasure. So you don't have to suffer through anymore that old stuff.
Awesome.
You year bigot.
And this is what I'm hearing from my co-host after I have suggested watching like the early Lumiere films in this podcast.
I'm still saying,
And by the way, I'm the guy who just bought on Blu-ray Napoleon from 1927, so you can prepare yourself for that as well if you're willing.
Well, it's funny to hear you make remarks about the underground, seeing how I actually proposed that we would have watched. They died, the rubber boots on. Okay. Way too underground, even for you.
Yep. So, what is the next film then, Henrik?
I'm guessing it's The Invisible Woman, 2013.
Oh, bummer. Are we not yet getting back to the golden age of porn?
Like I said, for the next porn episode, we actually really do need to get a guest from the industry or something like that to make sure that the next time we actually do the episode right.
Okay, fine with me. Contacting Raquel Liekki as we speak.
Hey, I'm game.
But yeah, hey, that was our first silent film in the podcast. Long time coming. And unlike some other podcasters have said about the birth of a nation, hey, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think we just did throw the baby out with the bathwater with this case. Good riddance, and see you next week with Coriolanus.
Until then, it's gonna be Shakespeare, so it's gonna be lit as fuck.
Well, this doesn't help his case in any way.
It doesn't help his case.
Sorry, I can't help laughing.